Now, the State of the Union address this week suggests that President Cyril Ramaphosa centralized more key government functions in his office. Ramaphosa says he has appointed ex-mining boss Sipho Nkosi in his office to cut the red tape that hampers the setting up of small businesses. Previously, he said that the minister in the Presidency, Mondli Gungubele, would replace the role of the former Minister of State Security and manage the State Security Agency. Now, critics say he's tightening his grip on the state and setting up parallel government structures. Others believe this is all essential to getting things done. To discuss, we're joined by political analyst Professor Susan Booysen. Prof, thank you for being with us. Firstly, do you think this criticism about the centralization, the growing presidency, is it justified?
Yes, in some respects, Francis, certainly. In others, no, not really. And when we have to consider in the first place that this is a long-standing phenomenon, it really started under former President Thabo Mbeki, and the state structures, especially those around the presidency, have been expanding ever since, for various reasons. Mostly under Mbeki and Ramaphosa, I would say, has been and continues to be to try to get operations to run more efficiently and to fast-track certain functions. We can argue that we have often not seen the effect of such fast-tracking, for example. But these are serious efforts by presidents, and including now President Cyril Ramaphosa, to get faster action, because the South African state is notoriously weak and slow, and Ramaphosa inherited a very weak state.
Yeah.
It has indeed been one of the benchmarks of his presidency, that there are many supplementary, additional strengthening structures that he uses in the presidency to try to make things work.
But if he can't get the ministers to do their jobs and make things quicker and smoother, shouldn't he be reshuffling cabinet and rather getting the right people in the right position where he can trust them to do the job?
Ideally, yes, and I would certainly say he has to do that. But then in the real world of politics and balancing factions in a political party such as the ANC, and balancing different constituencies of genders and provinces, etc., even age nowadays, then it becomes very difficult to reshuffle a cabinet and to retain a maximum amount of loyalty of all ministers in that. And here is, of course, such evidence of the fusion of ANC and state power, because the ANC politics play out in the state and in executive of the state, such as the cabinet. So Ramaphosa's hands in many ways are tied. Especially, it shouldn't be, but they are, in a year such as the current one, where ANC also has national elections, and if he wants to retain power, then he has to balance those different constituencies. So these are the forever clashing expectations and demands of the state and the party.
However, let's look at the red tape cutter that he announced in the State of the Nation address. So the criticism there is that we're dealing with red tape now. There's already a department for small businesses. There's already a department for trade and industry and a whole department for finance. Does he not risk now undermining those ministers?
In many respects, yes, and we have seen that happen. We can think, for example, of the State Security Operations, State Security Council, and location of that in the presidency. In other cases, such as cooperation between the presidency and the National Treasury, also through the so-called Operation Vulindlela, we have seen close cooperation in that. And many of these structures that President Ramaphosa is bringing into the presidency also is intra-state additional coordination mechanisms. We see so many interministerial committees, interministerial task teams, besides those that comprise outside actors, advisory councils, etc. So in some cases, there is a tight cooperation between them and between the presidency and the relevant department. But of course, it is also a motion of no confidence in those departments. The fact that those ministers have to come to ministerial task team meetings and help get the president's direct intervention, perhaps through these supplementary structures, in order to get their own departments' work. So it's really an indictment of many of the individual departments that there isn't sufficient coherence between central government and presidency projects and programs, and that those that can be implemented efficiently in the departments.
Yeah. I guess you could argue, if we look at infrastructure, I'm sure just to get a project through, it involves a lot of different departments: economic development, infrastructure itself, finance, public works, the province involved, the municipalities involved, the list goes on. So maybe you need something that cuts across everybody and gets them all to do their part. But does that always have to be in the presidency? Is that the most efficient way we've got?
Yes. The infrastructure planning, operation, renewal, that is such a big part of President Ramaphosa's economic plan. And in a way, it is obvious that there will be additional intra-government structures that come in and help the president to fast-track and execute these projects and programs. And there it really makes sense. Where one can ask additional questions is where the government departments are really circumvented and additional outside opinions, advice, forms of advice are brought in to try to get decisions faster, where Cyril Ramaphosa really leans on outside opinion or advisory councils or special envoys, etc., to try to get better consensus on decisions and policies that have to be pursued. So it cuts both ways. In some places, it's completely legitimate and essential. In other places, it shows the weakness of the state and the fact that the president cannot always rely on his own ministers and departments.
Yeah. What's the bigger danger for you here, Professor, finally, that things aren't done if he doesn't centralize because of the political forces you've spoken about, or that he gets things done, but there's this super presidency with so much power that will be passed on to a president that we don't yet know about?
Yes, indeed. That there is rightly that need to do that. And then the question of centralization of power. It is not Ramaphosa that started it, although in many respects he is probably perfecting it. But it's come from a few presidencies ago. And your point is exactly proven in the fact that former President Mbeki started it, and former President Zuma then embraced that structure, and it expanded massively under his guard. So these structures can become misguided and can be abused. And so for me, it's very important that we remain aware of these phenomena, of the nature of the presidency, and remain very vigilant and draw the line as to when it is not about getting the state more efficient, and whether there is, in parallel with this operation, efforts to get the state more efficient, because it's a hugely malfunctioning state, not in all respects, but in many respects.
All right, and that's a message to journalists as well, to remain vigilant. We'll continue to follow this trend in the presidency, see how it works out in terms of efficiency. That was political analyst Professor Susan Booysen.